And then I'd like to cap it with a report from Oxfam in London. We had first snowfall in Baghdad in over 100 years, tornadoes in Cairo and London. In 2007, we had records on the number of tornadoes hit in New York City, Iran, and Oman. Tornadoes doubled in 2008 than prior years. Afghanistan suffered the worst weather in 30 years. More than 1 million homeless and flooding in China last year. The worst snowstorms in 50 years slams China, and millions are marooned. New Zealand volcanoes erupt without warning following some cyclones. 1.8 million people are evacuated as a typhoon pounds China, and heat waves kill people from Tennessee and across Europe. This is last year. And now this is the latest Oxfam London study report. If you don't mind, let me read just a couple sentences here.
Okay.
You'll see what we're talking about in terms of weather. London reports that natural disasters have quadrupled in the last 20 years, with flooding worldwide increased sixfold. The planet is now experiencing about 500 natural disasters per year compared to the last 100-year norm of 120 per year. This Oxfam study was compiled using data from the Red Cross, the United Nations, and specialist researchers at Leuven University in Belgium. And I'd like to quote this one phrase from the report. This summarizes it all. Quote, "This is not a freak year," referring to 2008 and now. "It follows a pattern of more frequent, more erratic, more unpredictable, and more extreme weather events that are affecting more people," unquote.
You know,
and they don't see an end.
The whole topic of climate change is politically charged, supercharged. If you mention the term global warming, you got half the people want to cut your throat or something. I remember you mentioned snow in Baghdad the first time in 100 years. We had a big snow here in December in the Las Vegas Valley. It's not unprecedented, but it's very unusual. And people would write in to say, aha, here's proof that there's no global warming because it's cold here. But it did seem to strike me that there's something odd going on with the weather, whether it's global warming or global cooling, or I guess it's manifesting itself in different places in different ways.
It's a little erratic, and a lot of Earth's weather is also connected directly with the sun. And what you would expect, whatever affects as our solar system gets closer, the sun is nothing but a star. It will be affected by this plane as well. And anything that affects the sun is going to have repercussions on the world's weather. Let me give you an example of what's happening with the sun. 2003 was the end of the solar minimum, the 11-year solar cycle. The
Right.
next solar maximum, as we know, is going to be in 2012. Well, during the year of the solar minimum, 2003, the sun literally went on, and the NSA reports, and I quote, a rampage. And it had more X-class flares during a solar minimum than any time they had in recorded history. I mentioned briefly a couple of the X-class flare numbers. They are afraid of what's going to happen. If that was a minimum, they're afraid is what's going to happen when 2012 comes along, which is the solar minimum, which just coincidentally happens to reside at the time that we're saying that we should be nearest the center of this galactic plane.
Okay,
Now,
tell me, what could happen? How bad does that get?
Let me tell you how bad. NSA just released a report, the NSA being the National Academy of Sciences. They released a report 2 days ago, and they were referencing a power grid breakdown. The largest major solar storm that had ever existed in the history of recording happened in 1859. And it caused telegraph wires to short out in the United States and Europe. From that little bit of information, they were able to surmise the energy, project what type of event is about to happen. And the report is actually incredibly scary. They indicated that as a result of the solar minimum years, a remarkable rampage occurred with 10 major solar flares, and it knocked out 2 Earth-orbiting satellites and crippling an instrument aboard the Mars orbiter. They are indicating that this 2012 event, it's an if, they have no way of knowing, if the same type of storm occurs in 2012 that occurred in 1859 during the solar maximum, and they expect it to be more intense because of what just happened a few years ago, that it has the potential of knocking out the power grid in the United States and all around the world. And let me quote, the power grids are so interconnected that a big storm, the type expected to occur about once a century, could cause a cascade of failures that would sweep across the United States, cutting power to 130 million people or more in less than a few minutes. Such widespread power outages, it goes on. It basically, by the end of the report, the entire country has just been thrown in the dark ages, and it could take up to 6 months to bring it up. That alone, if the shift never even happened, that alone could cause the type of pandemic we were talking about with foods being depleted from the stores in 3 days.
You mentioned this is a National Academy of Sciences report. Can you give us the title of that thing?
This is the National Academy of Sciences. In fact, when the report came out, Fox News reported it just 2 days ago, Friday, January 9th. The reporter was Mr. Britt, Robert Roy Britt.
What's the title of this thing? And I'm asking so if people want to look for it online, they can find it.
Powerful solar storm could shut down U.S. for months.
Okay. And that, can they find that on your website?
No, but I can have it put up there tomorrow.
Okay, that's a good idea. Right. As I recall, I remember reading this, and I'm not sure we have enough time to answer, but we'll get started on it before our next break. You were going to make an expedition to the North Pole to sort of check out some evidence regarding potential pole shifts. Did you do that?
We actually had that scheduled for last August. That expedition was being led by Dr. Brooks Agnew. Some of the funding fell through, and it was rescheduled for next August 16th. So it is still in place. It's going to be about 8 months from now.
Okay.
So
and what are you going to look for?
We're looking for about the funding is quite expensive because we need an atomic ice cutter, and there are only 2 available in the world for rent, private rent. And so that's the problem.
An atomic ice cutter?
We do need an atomic ice cutter to get to where we need to go. And it's quite expensive. You have to rent the ice cutter, and, of course, that comes with the crew and everything else. It was put off initially because our own Department of Transportation insisted that we could not board a foreign vessel of that nature with potentially classified high technology, the type of instruments that the universities are building in order to put on board in order to measure the magnetic flux that we need to measure. The expedition is a purely scientific expedition in order to look at the anomalies as the magnetic fields of the Earth basically focus onto the gravitational, basically focus into a single spot. These type of instruments have not existed before, and we need to go to the source because we can't create this type of field in nature. Man can create electromagnetic fields, incredibly intense electromagnetic fields, but we can't create purely magnetic fields. And this is what we need to go to. This is why the expedition. And a number of universities and scientists from all around the world are invited and going, and they all have their own individual reasons and what their universities are sending them for. My purpose is simply to measure flux variations and deviations to see how the magnetic field of the Earth is being affected by anything external, get any evidence whether it's stable and not moving or whether it's moving. We do know it wanders. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for very subtle micro changes.
Well, see, I'm not technical enough to know how you detect flux variations, but maybe you can tell us about that when we come back. We're talking with Brent Miller of the Horizon Project. We got a lot more to cover. Stay with us on Coast to Coast AM. Well, we're talking about some pretty grim scenarios. Polar shifts, solar flares, cataclysms on an unimaginable scale, billions of people dead. Not sure any of us are going to want to be around to see it, assuming it comes true. I guess the point would be, and we'll ask this of Brent Miller, the founder of the Horizon Project, what's the point? What's the point of even talking about it? If it's all going to be that bad and we can't do anything about it, we can't stop our planet from passing through the galactic plane, why even get into it? We'll get into that question and more when we come back on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back, everyone. I'm George Knapp, in tonight for Ian Punnett. Our guest is Brent Miller of the Horizon Project. We're talking about some pretty grim stuff that Brent and others believe is coming our way.